Kia ora, ko fusmataho, nā mai ki te whare, welcome to the house. We hear a lot of politicians on the radio, and you may well think we hear them far too often.
New Zealanders can finally see light at the end of the tunnel.
You can be a nerd, a crier, a hugger. You can be all of these things.
Got to say, we're a coalition on this side, they're a no-alition on that side.
A hiring freeze in our health system when it is under so much pressure.
Their voices, their tone, their particular accents become incredibly familiar, maybe all too familiar.
This government leaves anyone with a heart feeling pretty bloody heavy.
There seemed to be a layer of blue wrapping over all the pink wrapping that we'd been trying to give the public.
When you declare war on a party called New Zealand First, there's going to be repercussions.
But what we don't often hear is what they used to sound like. Because as much as you're used to the modern style and accent of politics, these things change. So here for your interest and for a break from the voices you know too well, here are the voices of some of their predecessors. We'll take them in an historical order of sorts, which means we also begin with the worst quality audio. And William Massey, who you might not be able to tell, was born in Ireland. He was Prime Minister from 1912 to 1925 and one of the signatories of the Treaty of Versailles. He's speaking here at the end of World War I and hoping that the British Empire will last for all time to spread justice, knowledge and peace into the darkest corners of the earth.
The British Empire will last for all time. The greatest the world has ever seen. The United Nations of Britain, one king, one flag, one empire.
Here is outgoing Prime Minister of a reform government, Gordon Coates, in 1928, explaining why his party lost the election.
No government can expect to retain its full measure of popular support during a depression of such extraordinary severity as that through which we have passed. But the issue in the present election has been seriously confused by the intrusion of a third party and of a number of independents. I am confident that the result would have been very different had the issue not been confused in this way.
And here is one of the men who beat him, George Forbes, as Prime Minister in 1935, farewelling Lord Bledisloe, an outgoing Governor-General, at a time when all the Governors-General were incredibly plummy.
When one looks back on time of their arrival and remembers how things have been very, very difficult during the period that they've been here, one realizes how much they have done to encourage a spirit of optimism when the clouds look dark.
Forbes, in his turn, was beaten by Michael Joseph Savage, who was Australian-born. And I wonder whether his immigrant roots would have been a point of attack in his parliament. Anyway, here he is talking about Nazism, a topic that again is eerily relevant.
Nazism is militant and insatiable paganism. In short, but terrible history, it has caused incalculable suffering. If permitted to continue, it will spread misery and desolation throughout the world. It cannot be appeased or conciliated. Either it or civilization must disappear. To destroy it, but not the great nation which it has so cruelly cheated, is the task of those who have taken up arms against Nazism. May God prosper those arms. I am satisfied that nowhere will the issue be more clearly understood than in New Zealand, where for almost a century, behind the sure shield of Britain, we have enjoyed and cherished freedom and self-government, both with gratitude for the past and with confidence in the future. We range ourselves without fear beside Britain. Where she goes, we go. Where she stands, we stand. We are only a small and young nation, but we are one and all a band of brothers, and we march forward with a union of hearts and wills to a common destiny.
You don't hear MPs quoting Shakespeare much anymore. After Savage came another immigrant, Peter Fraser. This is part of a radio Christmas message, and you might hear that he was born in Scotland.
Without this Christian beacon light of goodwill, the future would indeed be one of dark despair. Hatred, mistrust, suspicion, and misunderstanding inevitably breed strife. This is happening in many parts of the world today. It is being made worse by doctrines whose very existence depends on hatred and misery. Peace is menaced by the implacable and yielding totalitarian bigotry which insists on strife as the inevitable way to be followed. We must realize how solemn the message of Christmas is and how great is our responsibility to defend this pure light against the evil forces which threaten to extinguish it.
The general election for 1949 is almost upon us.
Ronald Algie, one of New Zealand Parliament's more respected speakers, a National Party MP for Remuera, speaking during the election campaign in 1949. And you might think, hearing this, that it's not just the delivery that is charmingly old-fashioned.
The battle that precedes it is just about half over. So far, it has been a good, clean fight, and that is just exactly what you would wish and expect it to be. After all, we, as members of rival political parties, are asking you to choose one of two sides as your government for the next 3 years. You'll be looking for clean fighters, and it would be very, very silly of any of us to deliberately lower the standard. It's a game that has to be played without the ruling hand of an umpire or referee, and that fact alone should compel us to do all we can to keep it on the highest possible level of good sportsmanship.
You might not be able to tell from his accent, but Algie was born in Southland, in Wyndham, and educated in Southland and Otago. He was a National Party MP for Remuera from the 1940s to the 1960s. Here is Sidney Holland. At this point, he was already Prime Minister and is defending the cost of living increases, so that's familiar. To help you get his joke, the Labour Party newspaper was the Southern Cross, and if you're listening for accents, he's born in Canterbury.
In 1949, the price of newsprint was £42 a tonne. The latest price I'm able to get is £75 a tonne. And so the price of your newspaper has gone up from twopence to threepence. But the Southern Cross went up from twopence to threepence too.
Here's some fun context. The cost of living pressures that Sid Holland was referring to there led to the 1951 waterfront strike. And despite the general joviality of his speech, it was Sid Holland's government that during that strike cracked down on the freedom of speech and brought in regulations that made it illegal to give food to striking workers or to their families. The next recording is also of an immigrant MP, and this one comes with a nice British Midlands accent. Walter Nash, a one-term Labour MP at the end of the 50s.
That there are a lot of people can't have what they're having now. 2/3 of the people of the world today are not having enough to eat. They're always hungry, always hungry. 2/3 of them. Now we're starting in New Zealand and throughout the world, but we are starting here in New Zealand for 12 months to work out how we can get the rest of the world, all the world, free from hunger. The Freedom from Hunger campaign. I want food for everybody.
That was from a Christmas message by Labour leader Walter Nash. Sid Holland was replaced as national leader by Keith Holyoake. He sounds pretty plummy for someone born in Pahiatua and raised near Motueka. Still, his slightly condescending presentation won him 4 straight elections for national through the 60s and into the 70s.
So often it is difficult for us to understand the simple things, to grasp simple truths. Truths like the story of Christmas and its message for everyone. In this age of incredible change, of exciting new discoveries, of fantastic scientific advances, we find it difficult to see the simple truths, even to think simply. Everything's so complicated, life itself, and people are confused by the attractions and distractions of worldly things.
Here is the final Prime Minister that doesn't really sound like a modern Kiwi. Jack Marshall, born in Wellington and Prime Minister for not quite a year in 1972.
The National Party draws its support from every section of the community.
That is both a privilege and a problem. A problem because in maintaining the interests of the country as a whole, conflicting interests are not easily reconciled. That sometimes means finding a middle way while some would like another road. But it is a privilege in that it ensures that a national government will hold the balance fairly between all sections of the community.
It's possible that Norman Kirk's popularity was partly based on him sounding more like his electorate. He was an MP for Sydenham and Prime Minister from 1972 until his sudden death in 74.
Sort of automatic response. If a nerve twitched in London, then there was an aching toe in New Zealand. I don't think that that should have been. And in other circumstances, the course of events in New Zealand was being dictated. And in more recent times, of course, we've seen either a substantial influence in shaping New Zealand policies or an undue desire to please on the part of New Zealand politicians.
Replacing him was Bill Rowling, born near Motueka.
I suppose that this kind of criticism emanates from the fact that the previous government had steadfastly refused on so many occasions to recognise communist countries simply because of the regime. The attitude of the Labour government is that if a country is prepared to accept the hand of friendship, then we'll extend that hand of friendship. And of course it's clearly in our self-interest to effect the best possible relationship we can with the maximum number of countries.
And he was shown the door by Rob Muldoon, one of the more identifiable voices in New Zealand politics.
Mooing like a couple of old heifers out in the back paddock. Never mind. They'll be hamburger before long.
And for identifiable voices, here's the man who tossed out Rob Muldoon, David Lange. Here he is scrambling to fix the economic chaos that his predecessor left in his wake.
First, the exchange rate will be devalued by 20%. This will restore confidence in the currency, stop the speculation, and allow normal trading to proceed again.
And for the voice of one final Prime Minister, because at this point they seem to be getting more Kiwi as they go. Mike Moore.
I'm an ordinary joker, getting old before my time. For my heart's in Tamaranui, on the main trunk line.
Well, that was a break from the voices of today's MPs, filled with the voices of their political antecedents. Call it a busman's holiday. You've been listening to The House. E te whakaranga koe ki te whare. This program is produced with funding from Parliament's Office of the Clerk. Matua.